people talk about Silicon Valley and the military, oftentimes they say, hey, we're not for the DoD, and what we were doing here around World War II, Silicon Valley wouldn't have happened. But there's more than just that. Some of the earliest folks that were building companies and investing in companies were military veterans themselves. Pitch and Bill are both veterans. Pitch is an Air Force veteran. Bill is an Army veteran. Bill served in Korean War. Right before this, he mentioned that were it not for a soldier that served with him in Korea, he might not be here today because he almost stepped on a landmine. And both of them were the very first venture capital investors. Bill's legacy is incredible. He started first with Draper, Gaither, Anderson. Then him and Pitch worked together at Draper and Johnson. And then he started Sutter Hill Ventures. And for those who are keeping tabs on venture these days, Sutter Hill incubated and then IPO'd Snowflake. So Sutter Hill is probably one of the most preeminent venture capital firms in all the Valley and one of the oldest. Pitch, incredible background in history. The short of it, and we'll go much more into it, is grew up, moved out to the Bay Area. Father was an athlete and coach. Pitch was an athlete and coach. Served in the Air Force. Him and Bill got to know each other after both of them went to business schools, Harvard Business School, Stanford Business School, and they met at a steel mill. And at the steel mill, they were like, hey, maybe we should go out west and go do some venture capital investing. The last thing I'll quickly say about Pitch was he spent several years teaching at the Stanford Business School, and while he was there, he taught some really great students. One of them is Joe Lacob, the Golden State Warriors owner, amongst many other incredible folks. So we're gonna do about 30, 40 minutes of a conversation between the four of us. Then we'll open it up to audience, and then we're gonna recognize Pitch and Bill for being the incredible humans, investors, and legends that they are. So I've listened to a podcast with both of you on it before. It was extremely fascinating, especially the story about, Bill, how you landed your wife. I think it's one of the most charming and also gutsy stories that I think a Army veteran and the veterans here will appreciate. Can you talk a little bit about that, or do you want me to set the stage a bit?
Well, I think you do it your way. This is a pretty good sized crowd. I'd say we like to hear about ourselves, so keep it up and we'll sit down here and listen.
So some of the backstory there is Bill was on a cruise, and there was a lady that was sitting beside him. She had a ring, and he found out that she was recently engaged. And by the end of the cruise, she was recently engaged, but to Bill.
That's a true story.
Well, I had it a lot harder. I was on the Stanford track team, and when I said to the guys, I'm going back east to business school, I don't know a girl east of the Rockies. And so one guy said, I do. And that ended up as Kathy, my wife. But it took a lot of salesmanship, I'd call it. So I first was stationed in Oklahoma at Tinker Air Force Base, and my mother was born in Indian Territory, not far from there. And finally, I was stationed in Oklahoma City, and then got transferred to Sacramento. So he was in cold weather. I was in very hot weather. But I was very proud of being in the Air Force. I was a civil pilot. I got my license after I got in the Air Force. So I never was a military pilot. But I think that being stationed in different towns, especially as different Oklahoma City from Sacramento, is very different. But Sacramento is really hot. And as Bill says in the book, Korea was really cold. And so we didn't know each other. We met before that, but my being stationed in Sacramento, I said to some friends of mine there that, you know, I have this girl coming to visit me. And so in those days, they said, she can stay with us. So she did. So I had a few months to get her to say yes, which she finally did. But that was, I had a completely different romance from you.
I didn't hear a word he said.
I mean, the golden tones of my young voice are gone. What I said in fact was, it took me quite a while to convince Kathy to marry me, and you had a faster rate.
Yeah.
Did you get that?
Let's keep the party light. What do you guys want to hear?
Well, so not sure if you guys heard the introduction, if you were out in the hall, but it was legend, and Adam was the introduction to us up here. And the story of my grandfather meeting my grandmother is a really interesting one. But because everyone here was in the service, you might appreciate the thing. Every 2 weeks, I have breakfast with my grandfather, and it's a really special time where for the last 8 years, I've been doing this. And I sort of get to start to put together this puzzle of what his life was over the course of those stories, and they're like little blips that I learn that shade color. And one of the things I learned was almost retelling of meeting my grandmother on this cruise ship where he proposed after 3 days. But the thing that I hadn't known was that he had just finished his tour in Korea. And so this was the first girl he'd seen.
That's true. When I was going over to meet my father, and first time I had seen him, and so I said, I met the girl I think I'm going to marry. And he laughed. He laughed because he said, that's the first girl you've seen in 9 months. I don't know, but she was terrific. And I did it. It lasted for a long time. She died quite recently, and it was the best decision I ever made.
I agree. Is not beautiful, not only beautiful, but she is charming and bright and loves to talk about other things. So to get back to myself, which my mother, as I said, grew up in Oklahoma before it was a state. And so she speaks of being a little girl and riding around. The Indians around her part of the country were called Creek Indians. So she'd tell us, my brother and me, we were little kids, about riding around the countryside with the Creek Indians. And my mother she didn't live to a very old lady, but she was a school teacher. I happen to have a picture in my bathroom, a little picture of her in her teaching clothes standing outside the school. So every morning I say, good morning, Mother, Mom, and I feel good about that.
2 quick notes. One is Bill's father was instrumental in the Marshall Plan. in terms of making sure that the Marshall Plan rebuilt Europe. And so just an incredible background and service in their family. The other thing that I found fascinating in researching you all was that you all used to have to find your deals and drive around with an Oldsmobile, hitting up different ranches. Can you talk about what it was like being the earliest venture capitalist and finding founders?
Well, in my case, I still remember the blue Buick that I drove around saying, I'd knock on a door, and this was Silicon Valley long before it was known that way, and I'd knock on the door and say, hey, I'm here to see what you do. I'm pretty interested in making investments out here, so tell me what you do. And so
always did.
I said, we'd like to invest. Oh, come right in. And very seldom did I get turned down. And I still remember that blue Buick that you and I drove around in, and it was exciting to be in the middle of Silicon Valley as it's known today. We made several good investments at that time because really we were the only ones really interested in making investments, and we were early on, and it's a wonderful life when you've got nothing, no competition, and you got that blue Buick and big time. You feel like you're a big shot anyway, and we, as you can tell, we are just ordinary people here, one of you, and very, very glad to answer questions and so on. Or, Adam, how do you want to do this?
Well, I think everyone's going to go buy a blue Buick after this, is probably what's going to happen. No, that was fantastic. What, do you have any?
I was also.
Got in the venture capital business. If it hadn't been for Bill, he went to work in the steel company as a sales trainee, and I went to work as a production trainee. But we both were offered company houses to live in, and as you'd guess it, they were near each other. So not only we became good friends, our wives became good friends. So we had these really good neighbors, the Drapers, and we did a lot of things together. And it ended up with my leaving my job to join a venture fund, which Bill and I started. And it worked out pretty well.
Very well. I'm not buying lunch for all you guys, but I could afford it, actually.
I couldn't. That's one difference between us.
One of their investments that did really well, that has had a life-changing impact for people, is the defibrillator, I believe. Is that right?
Say what you said again.
The defibrillator. Did you guys invest in a defibrillator company?
That was one of our first, right? I said, I didn't know what a defibrillator was. He knew. He was a technical guy, and I was just, an ordinary junkie that hung out with guys like him. And we had a great life together, and we made some pretty darn good deals. I don't know what our best deal was, but we had plenty, right?
We had plenty of. Later on, I helped start Amgen, which has turned out pretty well. But I think we went around together to knock on doors, and we said the equivalent of, "You want any money today?" And everybody was willing to talk. But we didn't know what we were doing, actually. We learned to base our decisions on the quality of the people more than the quality of the technology. And that's something I wouldn't have known when I started.
Yeah, I'd add something to that. I think both of us agreed that venture capital is not about the technology, it's not about a lot of other aspects. It's about the leadership and the people that you back. No doubt about it, the quality of the leader, and we check that out. We're both pretty good on people, and we talked a lot with these companies about who is the management. Well, who is running that? How do you make that decision? And a lot about that, to just feel out the people and who is helping you, who makes the most of the decision that you're not there on. And I would recommend that to all of you. It's a very good way to size up a company. Who's the leadership? Let's meet him again, and or her, by the way. And it works. It works for us, and I think it works for almost everybody. If you find out who is leading the company, how long they've been doing that, and how good they look to you. Wouldn't you agree?
I more than agree. I think that's essential to the business. Get to know the people, make judgments about them, who's leading the place, and do they have grit? Do they have knowledge? Do they have desire? A lot of other qualities that we don't easily associate, but especially the stick-to-itiveness is a big one. But in other words, the man or the woman, nowadays, especially the woman, because there's many more women starting companies than used to, they have to use good judgment about the grit of the people.
Something else I've gotten from hanging out with my grandfather, and I get to hang out with Pitch every once in a while too. But today, venture capital, it's like almost a new asset class. It moves fast. It's really quick. People are always talking about how much money they've raised, and transactions happen much in a speedier way because people are trying to allocate more capital. What's so amazing about listening to this generation talk about the asset class is that it's the pace. It's just, hey, let's get to know these people. Let's slow down for a little bit, and let's figure out what the right, do we want these leaders to be leading a big company? It's always about partnership at the end of the day, and I think these two, in a wild way, have had to, I don't know how long your partnership has, your friendship has hung out, but a long time. And that's been sort of a special piece of it. So it's, I don't know, if I were to bestow one thing based off of my knowledge and learnings, it would probably be just about the people around you are the most important people. These two partnered together 60, 70 years ago, and 70 years from now, who do you want to be on a stage with, hanging out, making fun of? I chose mine.
We were interviewed by a couple of guys for almost a quarter of the book. It's this interview this other guy had with us. And I didn't learn till later, these guys were Yale guys, where Bill went to school, and they came back and interviewed us a few times. So about 1/4 of the book is a verbatim citation of these interviews. And I thought they were pretty impressive guys. It turned out I didn't even know this because Bill is giving me a lot of propaganda about Yale, but it's a good school. And so I knew about Yale, but I hadn't heard much about it until I met Bill. And once I met Bill, I learned a lot about Yale. They call it Yale. I always call it Yale with 2 syllables, but it's Yale to you guys.
How important to you, to the early venture ecosystem, was like Stanford University, like the university systems, to the early Silicon Valley and venture capital?
Well, I might try to answer that and say very important. I don't know that there would be the success the two of us have on the stage here if we had been in Keokuk, Iowa, or some place in the Middle West.
You didn't know about Keokuk?
And but Stanford really very, very important because it developed young, dynamic, energetic people that could run companies. And we were in the middle of what we didn't realize at the time, but we were in the middle of Silicon Valley today, and we didn't know it. We just thought, let's try, the weather is pretty good, let's hang around here. And it worked pretty darn well.
One of the things that you all have said before was Stanford was critical, and then specifically Fred Terman at Stanford really helped to push instructors, professors, students to start companies. It felt like you all probably invested in a number of those companies.
Well, I think you're right. And I don't know, it just all worked out so well for the two of us. And I think most of the people in the room, if you are willing to take a chance, do something challenging, and you like the management team, it will work. You'll be up on the stage next year or in a couple of years, and like us, be able to pretend we're knowledgeable and talk to a group like this. This is a wonderful crowd, by the way. I thought there would be about 12 people. It's a wonderful group. And I know you all have very good genes to be here, and I know that you are really a talented group, and don't be afraid to work with other people, take lots of people's advice, but don't downplay your own instincts. That, I think, serves well. If you've got the right instincts about people and good leadership on the people you pick, it will work. I mean, you'll be up on the stage in a few years. And I I'll be sitting down there with Pitch saying, they don't have it right at all. So that's
We'll know more when you ask a few questions, because I'm hoping you will, because not only should you ask a question, but if you have something to say about that, it'd be a good time to do it any minute.
And if you do have questions, please line up behind one of these two microphones. I have a question for Adam. Bill mentioned that investing is all about the people. You do pre-seed investing. How much would you agree or disagree?
By the way, I sort of took my role today as like hype man, so like championing them. But I am an investor. My name is Adam Draper. I founded Boost VC, where we invest in pre-seed deep tech. And we were the first fund to ever focus on Bitcoin. We've been in that space for 12 years, and it's been great, to my grandfather's point. It's pretty fun to just find highly dynamic people, get them the resources they need, and try to help them succeed however you can. So to this point about people, the more I get entrenched in the business, where I've been actually seed investing for about 15 years now, pre-seed or seed, I don't even know what the word is anymore, it is only about people. It is 100% about people. It's my grandfather and I talk about this a lot, but it's energy. Do they have the energy to do it? Do they have the commitment to do it? And do they have the integrity to execute it? And those are sort of the three like pillars. I liked Pitches a lot. Grit, that's a good one. Grit is sort of the commitment one for me, but grit, that's cool. That just sounds better. Like, it's a little more wild, you know? Yeah, I'm we're in a very lucky, fortunate family where we've been able to do this career for multiple generations and continue so. And I think the greatest part of it are the people that you meet who just are inspired to try and solve a problem. And then 20 years later, that person did it. And you're like, what? You did that? And you get to kind of claim you're like a tiny, as a venture capitalist, you're like a tiny part of it. They did really a lot of the work, all of it. But you got to be a champion, so I'm championing them today. So same concept.
One word that came up that I didn't know much before I started is called grit. You know, everyone here knows what grit is by now, but desire, an unquenchable desire to succeed when things are going bad, you double down and try. So I love the word grit because it's so descriptive of one fundamental characteristic a good entrepreneur has.
And John Wayne is in True Grit, which is an incredible movie. So,
when you all started investing, I'm assuming, given World War II in Korea, that there were a number of veteran founders. Did you, was that the case, or did you all even be like, nah, that's not even criteria through which we evaluate, because almost everyone had probably served and were starting companies? I'm curious, how much did you all end up investing in veteran founders?
You want to take that?
Is it a question?
Yes, sir. About did you all invest in any military veteran founders, and how did that go?
Well, I invested in several deals. I think the most spectacular deal was brought to me by a friend, and a business school friend, actually, but a friend out of business school as well, and from Stanford. It was called Amgen. Amgen grew to several thousand times its original investment. And I say that as often as I can, but it was the best deal by far I ever did. I was on the board for 20 years or so. And many of you may have used that products they have, the biotech products. But I wish you'd think up some questions for us. We would love to tackle them.
I have one. It's an honor, gentlemen. Thank you very much. My name is James. I asked something earlier. I'm just representing a company here. Adam, I have a question, and I guess for you two gentlemen. In terms of asset investment, you decided to invest in Bitcoin pretty early on. Was there a decision that, in terms of a conversation, let's say over breakfast, saying like, I'm going to go hard on this, I'm going to have the grit to do this, even though it's a volatile investment to make in terms of an asset? Right, and because I just, at that time, like I wouldn't.
Yeah, so the question, it was more to me about Bitcoin probably, but I have talked to my grandfather about it, and that's a funny story too.
That's actually the answer I would be looking for, is like, how did that conversation turn out, and how is that conversation different today?
Okay, he's asking me about my Bitcoin investment thesis. Here, I'll tell it really quick, not to take too much time, but So I was the first investor in Coinbase, and this guy named Brian Armstrong came to me at a coffee shop, and he said, at some point the world's going to be on one financial infrastructure. And I was like, yeah, why not? That sounds great. Part of our job is just saying yes to whoever's in the room and not doubting that that's true. And so I started to get excited. It wasn't about Bitcoin, though. I was just excited about this general concept. And then I started to dive more into Bitcoin, and everyone I talked to about it was like the weirdest person I'd ever met, but also the most dynamic and amazing. And I was like, I think I'm going all in. And I brought it up to both my dad and my grandfather, and they both had different responses. The one, I was on a panel with my grandfather and my dad 12 years ago, and Bitcoin's brought up, and my grandpa said, don't be the first Draper to go to prison. And to that, my dad says, what makes you think he would be? Which I thought was funny. But so that was a joke. It was on a panel. But the idea that you could create a new reserve currency or a currency was sort of a crazy idea. It still is a crazy idea. My conviction was really about the people, though. Like, the people around it were just so incredible. And I think they probably identified that with biotech and the internet. It was just, there was a rebellious group of people who were very intelligent, who wanted to do things. And that's where we get to be a part of the journey. So that would be my quick grit about Bitcoin.
One thing I'd say, be sure and expand your own fund of knowledge. I know that I wouldn't call it idly, I was reading some things about biotechnology, and I took a course at Stanford in biotechnology, and ended up with my doing Amgen, which I probably wouldn't have otherwise done. But
have you all heard of Amgen? Yeah, raise your hand. Like, yeah, it's pretty, pardon my French, but badass.
what happened was that I heard that biotech, even though I was a mechanical engineer, I heard that biotech was probably going to be important, and it struck me that it would be. So I took a course at Stanford in, what was that course? It had something to do with biotechnology. And it turned out to be the more single, as far as economic value, thing I've ever done in terms of courses.
Wow.
And I'd say, you all are almost all graduates of colleges. Think of the stuff your college taught, or the college where you live teaches, and do some stuff that's new to you and interesting. You'll be amazing what you'll learn.
What was your favorite deal?
Well, there's so many, it's very hard to say, but it's like you don't want to pick winners and losers, because the people that you think of and come to mind right away would be happy, but all the other people that you also backed, and well, what about us? And so I have a rule. I don't pick one or another. I think they're all family. And just like you guys, we're all in the same family. And it's the best way to avoid problems.
My favorite's coin maze.
So when you all started investing, you all were one of the few and very rare venture capitalists. By the time you all were finishing up your venture capital career, did you find that there was a lot more competition? Because I remember listening how you all would like meet in a San Francisco restaurant. There's a handful of venture capitalists. Did it suddenly become like very competitive by the time you all had transitioned out, or not?
By the way, Bill's book is very good. It's called Bill Draper, Beyond the Headlines. And I thought it was sort of an egotistical name, but Bill was involved in headlines a lot. He's just realistic. And so I read it. I read all the way through it, and it's got a bunch of interviews in it. A bunch of Yale guys started a company to write books, and they interviewed Bill not to write a book, just and they reported the interview in the book. And I got most of the way through the book except for the last interview. But you do try to take advantage of where you went to school, or people you knew in school, because you'll be amazed how close you feel to them.
Yeah, there was a guy who interviewed my grandfather, and he has Bill Draper Beyond the Headlines, and it's just a huge transcript of all these questions throughout his life, and it's really great. Good recommendation pitch. He also has another book that's called The Startup Game that is awesome. Also, I'm only halfway through the one that Pitch brought up. I'm not fully all the way through, but Startup Game, fantastic book also. So
It talks about the investment that Tim did in Hotmail, amongst other deals. It's a great book. Sir.
Yes, Dave Willard, go by Mud.
sorry, say your name again.
David Willard.
David.
Yeah, everyone will call me Mud, but that's all good.
Mud.
Mud, yes. I'm an Air Force background.
Nice.
Yeah, there you go.
That's cool.
So I'm very curious to know, as you were coming into Silicon Valley when you did, government was still engaged there, as I best can understand. And so it was still part of the ecosystem there, part of the fabric of Silicon Valley. That changed over time. The Defense Department in particular is trying to re-engage the Valley now. I'm curious to know if you have a perspective on how that worked so well at the time, and like what that interaction was like, if it was less constrained as it is today with a lot of the regulatory environment that we live in, et cetera. If you have anything to say about that, that'll be very interesting to me.
Take the last part of that question and ask it again.
How DoD or the government worked so well then, how that worked well, and if there are any lessons that we can draw for today.
Well, I think specific technical training in the field you invest in isn't important. What is important is your ability to judge people and their grit and desire and determination to succeed, in addition to knowing something about their field.
Aaron.
Hi, Aaron Stachel from First Mile Ventures, and the industry has grown so much that companies are raising billions of dollars and are able to keep growing and stay private. I'm curious what it was like when you guys were getting started. Who was doing the follow-on capital, and what was it like for you to raise your funds?
Two-part question. One was, how hard was it to raise money back then? And then I'll ask the second one. Was it hard to raise money for the funds?
Yeah, your first fund, was it hard to raise those?
I'd say the answer is yes. But we were able, Bill and I together, and later on separately, were able to go around to people we knew that were investors and convince them that this group was strong and had desire and had the technical skill to serve a marketplace. In the end, the point of all of this is you're trying to serve a marketplace. You're not just trying to do something clever technically. And if you believe that will serve a marketplace, you can do that.
You know, my thought on that is, first of all, you have to have a blue Buick. And then you go around, and it's pretty easy to raise money if you got a blue Buick. The other part of it is you look for the leader of little company that's 4 or 5 people, 7 people, and you look for the leader and you hang out there for a while just to see, is he making the decisions or is she making the decisions? How is this working? And, you know, you go to the John and take plenty of time to hang around with the company. And pretty soon you get to know what that company is working, how it's working, why it works well. And then it becomes easy, because if you're pretty good on people, and I think all of us are, you can identify how that company is working if you spend a good bit of time with this organization that is brand new to you, but in another day or two that you have, you find that, oh, that's the way it works. I see. No, I'm not going to touch it. But then your decision to invest or not gets to be very easy if you get to know that organization pretty well. And I would recommend to everybody, you know, whatever decisions you have to make in your own businesses, it obviously is important to spend a good bit of time before you touch it. And I think all of us would agree that we're pretty good on people, and that helps a lot. If you're not, find somebody that is good on people to help you make your decision.
So I can't speak from their generation. I wasn't born yet. But I started Boost VC. My first fund iteration was sort of 2012, 2013. But then my first real institutional fund was in 2016. And I had started to have these breakfasts with my grandfather. And I met with 300 different investors. And you're thinking, hey, I'm a 4th generation venture capitalist. This should be pretty easy to raise a fund of more than $6 million, which I had raised up to that point. I was trying to raise $38 million, and I talked to 300 people, and I had not raised a fund. And so I go, and I'm going to go whine to my grandfather. So I go to my grandfather with breakfast at Bucks, and I'm like, you know, fundraising's really hard. And he goes, well, how many people have you talked to? And I'm thinking he's challenging me on like my, like doing the work, like grandson, do the work. And so I go 300. I've talked to 300 people. I've gotten in rooms with 300 people. And he waits a second. Well, maybe you're doing it wrong. And it broke my world, but he was correct. I was actually doing it incorrectly. It was, I kept thinking I'm selling everyone rather than trying to solve a problem.
Actually doing what?
So, sorry, I thought I was always selling someone rather than solving their problem. And that change for me was what changed for me to fundraise, was when I was actually the answer to someone needing venture capital. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's my advice I got from my grandfather, and I think about it every day. So
I think the main thing about this discussion was I could go back 40 years and say, I thought at first it'd be discovering some incredible piece of technology and building a company about it. It is that, but it better be accompanied by incredible people that have grit and desire.
I
Sir.
agree.
Hey, thanks, Tim. Charlie Kelly, a venture lender with Stifel Financial and a former submariner. Thanks for all the great stories this afternoon on the Valley. I would love to hear your perspective on conflict. Raising a fund is hard, running a fund is hard, investing is hard, startups are hard. Pitch and Bill, how have you both dealt with conflict and disagreements and still be able to be on the same stage after, 6 decades later? How do you still preserve the friendship but make the right decisions for the business at the fund level and for your companies? Thanks.
Do you guys have any solutions to just conflict?
Quite hear what he said.
Conflict. So how have you dealt with conflict with each other or with other founders or with anything over the course of your career? What has kept?
Oh, you'll have conflict, and it usually goes to the victory and the argument will go to a bright person, man or woman, who believes in what they're doing. And I have one saying that I always say, relaxing makes me nervous. And people say, can't you relax? I said, no.
I love that. I think when there's conflict, there's energy. And that's what you're saying, right? Like, where there's conflict, there's energy. There's a smart person who really cares. Love that.
One of the things I've noticed in your careers, both of you, is that you all have done a healthy bit of public service beyond venture capital, and that you all have given back after you all have had tremendous success. Do you all want to talk about your careers post-venture capital?
Well, Bill's done a lot more in public interest than I have, but I have done a couple of things. I served on a community college board for 12 years. I taught a course for 12 years about venture capital and entrepreneurship. And I think that I've given endless talks around town on different things, but I think you got to contribute back to the community. I was a kid, I grew up in Palo Alto, went to Palo Alto High. I went across the street to Stanford, and then I applied to Harvard Business School, but I didn't get in. So then I was back east running a track meet, and I went up to Boston. And I sat down, and the admissions director said, I'm exactly the guy you want. You want people like me. And first of all, I'm a nationally ranked runner, and I really think that I got tremendous desire to do this. And so they eventually let me in. So I went to see the guy, and I did get into Harvard the first couple of days I was there. And I said, I thank you for that. He said, please don't tell people you pounded on my desk and let you in. But I didn't ever tell anybody. I didn't quite pound on his desk, but close to it.
I think he answered.
Perfect.
I want to thank Bill, Pitch, for all that they've done for Silicon Valley, for laying the seeds. When we say pre-seed, well, they were pre-seed way back in the day. You all have had tremendous success. You all have helped build Silicon Valley to what it is today. The Draper family continues to have tremendous success. I mean, it's fascinating that Adam is doing a lot of defense and dual use. The last session was about that. His father and the GFJ is a big investor in SpaceX, so it's fascinating to see the whole defense come full circle. Please, everyone, give a round of applause for Bill and Pitch.